Welcome. This is the quarterly migration video meeting. I'm Benji Fisher, and one of the maintainers of the Migrate API, and also on the call are Lucas Heading, another one, and Dinarkhan, or Maurice Dinarte, who's one of the contributors of documentation and frequent answerer on Slack. So yes, what is our agenda today? Does anyone want to take notes? I can take notes.
That's the benefit of using Slack, is it self-documents for you.
Hello, Alison.
Hello.
Joining us.
Where's the video?
And
My
Michael
phone is
West.
trying very hard. There it is.
Mike warned us that he would be a few minutes late.
Hi, Alison. Hi, Mike.
So, anyone want to put anything on the agenda? I have an open window to take notes.
I have questions, but not necessarily agenda items. Maybe if there is time at the end, I can fill them.
Okay. Random questions. Shall we talk about, I guess, deprecating or removing Migrate Drupal?
Yeah. That was actually what I was going to suggest.
Okay.
So you got the same thing on mind that I had.
And the weekly meetings.
I figure we should burn it to the ground. I say that joking.
Okay, well, let's just put it on the agenda for now. And you can tell us what you're serious about when we get to it.
Okay. That requires me to be serious, which is hard sometimes.
Let's see, there are a couple of issues marked major that come to mind. So one is getting migrate messages into the admin UI. And one is deprecating set.
I remember opening that set one years ago.
It won't die.
No, it won't.
Oh, and the memory management issue.
Yes, that just resurfaced here recently as well.
All right, so let me share my screen just so you can see what I've been typing. Not that one, not that one, that one. Sharing the right screen, you see a simple text editor screen.
I'm seeing a VI editor for something that
Ooh, that looks terrible, doesn't it?
doesn't quite seem like what we were going to be talking about.
Oh, did I share the wrong window? This should be
Michael, how are you today?
Oh, not too bad. Keeping busy.
It's
How you
well
been?
done.
Staying chill.
All right, do you see a different thin window now?
Yes.
Saying removing migrate Drupal at the top?
Yeah.
There we go.
So for removing migrate Drupal, do we just want to dive in on that, or
Sure.
do we need to like get anyone else to just agree with us there, or what's kind of, I feel like agreement that we want to do it is kind of the first step, maybe.
So I think we all agree that we want to remove it eventually, that we need to keep it around as long as people are still migrating from Drupal 6 and Drupal 7. And the current work in that direction is moving code from all the other modules into migrate Drupal. So all the migrations, all of the migration plugins, all of the tests. And I think that the only thing that's holding us back is not having enough time to devote to it. So Vicky, who's unfortunately not here, at least not on the Zoom call, is the one who's done most of the work so far. I don't know, Mike, have you done much? I certainly haven't.
No, I just kind of talked about it a bit. I mean, more to answer your question, Lucas, the plan has always been eventually to remove migrate Drupal. Obviously, we don't know when. There's still a lot of D7 sites. It's not happening immediately. Probably, definitely not in Drupal 10, probably not till Drupal 11. But we figure it's got to come out eventually, and end up in contrib. And so we were thinking to make it easier by moving everything into migrate Drupal, which of course, there was a big effort years ago to spread everything out into its associated module instead of having it all in migrate Drupal. And what we haven't done is discuss this with the core maintainers to make sure they're all on board. And so we've kind of just made an issue to move whatever ones we started with, certain field plugins or something, all into migrate Drupal. And at some point we'll RTBC it, and then we'll have a conversation on what we're going to, on whether it's what we want to do for sure or not. But I mean, I suggested before that we should probably talk with Alex and Nat and make sure that they're on board with the plan.
Do
we talked about it and just decided that it was easy enough to throw up a test patch and a test case to see how it was going to work. And then start a conversation from there once we had something to kind of show them what we were going to do and why. So
did we ever throw up that first test patch?
Yeah, there's an issue for moving all the field plugins into migrate Drupal. It's mostly done. It needs actually I think the needs review queue initiative guys reviewed it and RTBC'd it, but we pulled it back because we all need to kind of look at it again because there's a lot of technical issues with moving things out of the individual modules, with regards to that's kind of how we activate things when we're doing a migration. We look at what module, we know what modules are activated. So the plugins tied to those modules are activated, which kind of defines what migrations and things that we have. So we just need to do a lot of testing to make sure that, if I move field plugins from the phone module into migrate Drupal, and then I try to migrate a site with the phone module disabled, are we going to have the same results? So there's just a lot manual and or, new automated tests we need to write to make sure it's gonna actually do everything that we want it to do and not be hugely backwards incompatible.
I found it. It's 3332224. 3332224. And was this a fairly straightforward? But massive? And can we get rid of, how did we get rid of the noise from Kanul Sahu? Can't, I guess. Okay. So we moved it. She did a lot of work here. This
I
is
just pasted into the Zoom
probably,
chat the link that Lucas mentioned, and I see Mauricio, you gave us a link to a related issue.
all right, yeah, it is. Great. I should have done that. But when I look at it, that was a lot of work. I guess it's going to have to happen at some point. Just trying to think, is it the wisest for a limited amount of time? I can't think of any alternative. But it is going to mess with tests a lot. Like we do look at what source module all over the place, and that's going to be rather disruptive to contrib modules as well. So from a software architecture perspective, I'm just trying to think through. We have a lot of contrib modules that have field plugins. Meta tag, for example, has whole migration thingies built into it, and we've got other popular modules out there for various custom entities. Poll comes to mind. What's the one that where you can like bookmark something? There's modules out there that do all of these things, and they have so much embedded logic that depends upon what module the code resides in to build that whole mapping table and migrate Drupal UI, correct?
Yeah, but don't we
are
have a
we-
standard deprecation process for managing that as we?
Well, I guess where I'm going mentally, so I'll just get it out there and then we can go poke holes in it. What if, rather than going to all the work of moving, if what we do is we deprecate field plugin manager and we deprecate the source plugins without like moving them at all? Yeah. So the two examples that come to mind are node module. Deprecate all the source plugins there for nodes, and then the entire field plugin ecosystem, just deprecate the plugin manager. If the plugin manager gets triggered, trigger, or maybe do it in the right place so it doesn't break performance on an executing migration. But I don't know. I feel like I'm talking a lot without getting. I don't get a sense of what people are feeling about with this.
So I guess what I thought we were planning to do is create, excuse me, create new classes in the migrate Drupal module. So, excuse me, and make the existing classes wrappers for the new one. So for instance, here I'm looking at the one of the source modules in the node module. It extends fieldable entity. So this would become a wrapper for an identical class in the migrate Drupal module. This class would no longer have the plugin annotations, so it would no longer be a migrate source plugin. The new one would be the source plugin with the same ID. And then
yeah, but I think we will burn developers out for doing all of this moving around into one module that then has to move to contrib. What if we don't even ever move it to contrib?
what if we just remove it wholesale?
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm going.
So I guess this gives us a chance to do it piecemeal. Like it is a huge project and it's going to take a long time. And if we say, okay, we're going to remove migrate Drupal and we're not even going to move it to contrib, then we still have a huge task of going through the code and finding all of the classes that need to be removed and all the tests that need to be changed or removed. And
It's not so hard though, because you can put the deprecation in the YAML files for the, because there's always a YAML file for the migration. So just put a deprecation in the YAML file and say in 1 or 11.0.0, this will go away. I'd actually get really excited about that if we said that. And that would kind of almost in some ways force someone to call our bluff about the fact that Drupal 7 is not going to go end of life this fall, or is or not. What's the drama going on to happen with Drupal 7? Because I think the answer is we can never deprecate it in Drupal if Drupal 7 hasn't gone end of life. But once Drupal 7 goes end of life, I would say 6 months later, a year later, don't need to keep it in core anymore. So if we looked at release dates, I think it would be safe to say 12 months after November or whenever Drupal 7 goes end of life. So next fall, like 18 months, Drupal 7 would have been sunset for a year. Why are we keeping upgrade logic in Drupal anymore?
Well, we wouldn't. It'd go into contrib. I mean, why do we have upgrade logic for Drupal 6?
But why does it have to go to contrib? Why can't it just be dropped?
Die? Well, I mean, there'd be a riot.
Why? You've been on an unsupported system for a year. You could have upgraded at any point to Drupal 10. And then if you need to go, if you waited 3 years, you would have to first upgrade to Drupal 10. And then from Drupal 10, do the update process to Drupal 11.
Yeah, but I mean, business-wise, it's not going to make sense because if we don't continue to offer a upgrade path forward past that somehow, at least
there's always going to be an upgrade path from Drupal 10 to 11. There was an upgrade path from 8 to 9 and 9.
No, I mean from 7, because so many sites are still on 7 and they just will be forever because 7 somehow is just won't die. But
But no one's
if
going
if
to
we-
support the contrib version of all of this either.
no, I mean, it'll just be there in its final state and that's it. It'll be there to use at your own risk, more or less. I mean, it'll be considered feature complete and done. But I mean, the thing is like, you know, there's still a year after Drupal 7 is end of life, there will still be a ton of sites either on 7 with no support or on 7 with paid support. And if we don't offer the upgrade path, then there'll be an upgrade path to Backdrop or some other system. And you know, it's just, we want to keep people on Drupal. I mean, the powers that be, you know, need more adoption of Drupal 9 plus. So it's going to be a long time before we could just have this all go away, if ever. So
Well, if that's the case, then why do we need to move it to contrib?
well, I mean, there's the Slimmer Core initiative, among other things. I mean, we're trying to get rid of modules that we don't need. I think the API, the migrate API is very beneficial to have in core. I mean, you got JSON API to get data out, the migrate API to get data in. I think those complement each other.
Mhm.
But all the stuff to go from 6 and 7, I don't think needs to be in core. I don't think we need all of that code in there when, you know,
It's
a
going to get
limited number
so
of people are gonna use
stale
it.
and stop working, and it's going to be
Well,
a
you
joke.
can't tell me that no one, you can't play both sides of the argument that no one's going to care. You can't say we could just deprecate it and delete it because no one would care, and then say, well, if we move it to contrib, it'll get stale and everybody will be upset that it's stale.
No,
Can't be both.
I'm not saying they'll get upset. They'll say, if the argument is we have to move it to contrib because people need to use it, then it needs to be maintained. And I don't think that I don't know.
Like, what's the
I-
benefit of moving it if you're gonna let it, if it's gonna, right?
If it's
Because-
feature complete, if we're saying it's
Yeah.
feature complete and we're not going to touch it, like who's going to pick that up? Is there going to be an LTS vendor for the migrate system?
I don't know. Is someone going to maintain forum? I mean, like any of these modules that we kick out? I mean, the whole point is that it's up to the community to decide whether or not to maintain them. And we'll allow for proper, you know, we'll allow to have maintainers if people want to maintain them. If no one uses them, then no one, you know, if enough people use them, someone will maintain them. If no one uses them, then they won't need to be maintained. There's a migrate maintainer, Lucas. He maintains pretty much all of them. Migrate contrib modules. We figure we just have him do it.
Yeah.
So what if, I don't know, similarly, just throwing it out there, what if it is deprecated and removed, people who are still on Drupal 6 and 7, they could still upgrade to whatever version of Drupal last has this module in it, and then upgrade from there to whatever, 11, 12, who knows, right? Like there's still that, the code will still
Yeah.
exist in the universe. So it ends up being a two-step thing. And that's just kind of like, because you're still on Drupal 6.7 and that's the way it goes. It's already a nightmare. I mean, not really, I'm sorry. It's already expensive to go from 6.7 to 9 plus, right? Or 8.9, whatever. So I don't know. It's already not just like you can upgrade in place. I don't know,
Well,
throwing it out there is another thing.
Well, I mean, I'll say this, you know, again, and I know Vicky must have had some conversations with the other maintainers since she's in contact with them, but I mean, I don't know any specifics on that. But I mean, this is a conversation that is pointless for us to have because we don't get to make the decision anyway. You know, that
Well,
decision.
yes and no. But it does seem like a discussion that could happen in a public forum. And even happen at at a, what is there? Isn't there a Drupal conference coming up here in a month or two?
In
Sometime in
June,
June?
June 5th.
That perhaps we could have some discussions about. So I feel like I'm being heartless a little bit, but what I'm trying to express is less heartlessness about the 7 to 9 or 10 or 11 upgrade, but more just the reality that Drupal migrate has been kind of coasting for probably 2 years in the core API, or even longer. And I would be afraid of burnout and false advertising, or doing busy work to then eventually not find that there was anyone willing to maintain it, or just like there's like this whole series of like I could raise so many arguments one way, and then obviously Michael, you're doing a great job of the counter argument there. So I feel like there's a lot of good meat on both sides, and I hear you. We've got to do it for the viability of the life of Drupal, but at the end of the day, it also kind of comes down to show me the money a little bit, because who's going to pay for it? For those Drupal 7 sites and Drupal 6 sites that need to stay on Drupal 6 and 7 for as long as possible, it's a little bit like, well, who's supporting Drupal 7 right now? And in reality, they are. There's like 2 or 3 people, and they kind of have a lot of forked and custom code, or that's one camp. Super complex, can't ever upgrade because we invested too much technical debt. Or you've got the folks that are never going to upgrade because there's some NGO that installed this when it was 7.23 or something, and have never upgraded from 7.23 since, and have no budget to ever do so.
yeah, there are certainly a lot of sites like that who are never going to upgrade, whether or not Drupal 7 goes end of life. And somehow we want to understand how many people are actually migrating rather than how many Drupal 7 sites are left.
I mean, I felt like there's a lot of folks migrating last spring about this time, before or maybe even a little before that, before the announcement of Drupal 7 being extended by another year. I was getting a lot of leads, a lot of interest, and then that proverbial rug got pulled, and it deflated a lot of things. I hear of folks saying, well, Drupal 7 won't go away in fall of this year. And I tend to actually agree with that. Or guess that that's probably true, but disagree with the reason why. But at some point you have to pull it. But if it's going to still be there, I would personally prefer migrate to stay in core and 11, because then we've got failing tests all the time that are going to keep that upgrade path actually viable. I went through the pain of trying to get, was it media migrate or something, up to snuff here recently, so it could work with Drupal 10. Not something that I would necessarily recommend. Commerce migrate constantly is fighting there to stay working. on the contrib side for Migrate Plus and all those things, those are tools that tend to stay pretty stable, but every version of Drupal migrate upgrade, I end up having to fix a handful of things because modules get enabled and disabled, and upgrade paths are constantly shuffling. I guess it just feels easier to keep it in core. So what I would vote for is without trying to get too much ego and too much passion, and like some type of a public forum, like a plan issue for us to weigh the pros and cons. And even get, but it'd be nice to get a bellwether feel from our benevolent maintainer. Like, what's the goal here with keeping this alive? This upgrade path. Okay. Going on mute. You guys share your thoughts now, because too much of mine. I feel like I can push the conversation too strongly.
Well, I mean, I feel like the same thing that I said before is that this isn't the thing that we get to decide. Ultimately, it will come from, a combination of the project maintainers. So the conversation needs to be had with them to kind of decide what's going to happen with this and what the timeline can look like, given the the state of D7 end of life, and
but in a way we
adoption is going to be in flux.
Get to decide because someone has to continue supporting it. And if,
Well, we certainly have a voice, but and I think a fairly strong one. But ultimately, those people have to push the button on whatever we do or don't do. I mean, yes, we could just go on strike and say we're not touching anything until you tell us we can deprecate it and remove it from core without ever replacing it. Fine, whatever. But realistically, we need consensus among the maintainers to decide what we're going to do and what they're going to approve. And we haven't had that conversation yet. And I am perfectly happy to start that conversation with, at DrupalCon with whoever's there. I haven't, even if it's just a Slack conversation with Gabor to just see what his thoughts are on it to start, and then go from there. So, to me, it's that conversation that has to happen. And so the reason that we started that issue and decided to see, again, the decision that was made here, which, if I were a dictator, I would have said we had the conversation before starting an issue, but we decided and talked about it and decided
I think
that,
there's a great deal of benefit. We have now the feel that it took us a month to go from nothing to something. The something was one small piece, and we're still not sure if we need to spend another month on it. So I think we get a feel for how big this is.
The decision was to make those issues and start with this test one, and then use that as the springboard to start the conversation with the maintainers, which I think it's about time to do, one way or another. Because again, ultimately, it's, we need consensus with other people. We can't just unilaterally say what we're going to do and then have it happen. We don't get to push those buttons. We don't have access to push those buttons, except for Vicky, and she won't push those buttons without getting approval from other people anyway. So at the end of the day, we don't just get to arbitrarily do this without having those conversations. And I think it's time to have those conversations. And, if we want to do it in person in June, I think that would be fine. If we want to start it beforehand and finish it there, I think that's fine too. I don't know who all is planning on going. I'll be there.
I'll be there.
Yeah. I don't know if you're going to make it up to the States for it, Lucas, but I mean, we could do a Zoom call or something. Or grab a
it's
conference room or something, or
too hard to travel.
yeah.
COVID makes it difficult still.
So my position is, first of all, that if I can provide a contrib module, then even if I'm not willing to maintain it, I will feel that I have done my part, and those who need it have a good starting place. And the second point is that I still think that if we wait until it is time and then say, okay, now we're going to remove all of this code from Drupal, we're going to have a big mess on our hands, and it's going to be a big, difficult issue to manage. And that I think we will be saving ourselves trouble in the long run if we do this piecemeal, move bits to the migrate Drupal module, get it all in one place, and then when the time comes, we can just remove the whole thing all at once.
One thought I had just now was observing the process of the deprecations between Drupal 9 and 10. There's a lot of really great effort done by a lot of people to help with that process, where we even deprecated whole modules. Like, I think someone said forum, but there were others, like, was it quick edit and CK editor and so many. One other potential option that I want to just brainstorm for a moment here. What if we deprecate in place and then move over from in place to the contrib module?
I thought you were going to suggest that maybe we should enlist help,
Straight
which has always been our plan.
Yeah, well, but no, straight from the node module, deprecate straight over to migrate Drupal and contrib.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's fine, but how do we test all of the, issues that will arise from again, moving everything out of those individual modules and into, a single module? How do we get to test all the complications that come from that, because of the fact that, now if node's a bad example, but now if node module is disabled, we still have all the node migrations and node plugins still available. That's kind of the whole point here, is that why would we do that and wait 4 years to do that when we've got time right now? Migrate Drupal stuff is not coming out of core in Drupal 10, probably not in Drupal 11. But if we take the time while we have a few years and move all of the stuff into migrate Drupal module and make it so that it all works with, whatever modules are enabled when you run UI and test it all the way through, then when the time comes, we have a single self-contained module that can easily just get put into contrib and keep all of its namespaces and all of that. Versus, if we try to do what you're saying, then we have to wait until at least Drupal 11, and then we have to be sure that D7 is actually going to die, and we want to do that before D12. And then we have to figure all that stuff out down the road. And do
Well,
it probably on some sort of condensed timeline.
We would have to. It would be
We can't
just
do anything
removing-
else about getting migrate Drupal out of core right now. So why don't we solve those problems now while we have time and can take the time? And it's fine if it takes 6 months because we're not really adding any new features or anything. We're just testing the process.
Yeah.
I have a question. Lucas, earlier when y'all were talking about contrib modules with migration systems and plugins and things, needing to, I want to see if I understood something or if I misunderstood something. Is it the moving of plugins from various core modules into one module that is migrate Drupal? Is that the part that'll need to be done in a way that, like, carefully and slowly so that people can update all their stuff? Or is it moving migrate Drupal into contrib that'll make it a lot of work for contrib maintainers? And I hope I asked that clearly. Let me know if it doesn't make sense. Which step of the process is going to create work, if any, if I'm even understanding that
Good
right?
question.
Which
I
step of
hadn't
the
thought of
process
that.
is going to create a contrib headache for maintainers of contrib modules that have migration stuff, if any?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, there shouldn't be. The only thing that should be an issue for the contrib module maintainers is, again, if they're, extending cores plugin classes directly, in which case, if we move them into migrate Drupal, then at some point, the plugin IDs will be the same. If you're just doing writing migrations and referencing plugins, that stuff will all work. But if you have a custom plugin that extends an actual class, then you'll get a deprecation that it's gotten moved into the migrate Drupal module. And at that point, you'll have to update your code to extend the new version of the class. But once you do that, when we move migrate Drupal from core into contrib, it'll get to keep its namespace. And so there won't be anything more for them to do after that other than add it as a dependency in their module. Or at least that's the general plan. There's lots and lots and lots of technical nuances to that I'm glossing over, for the sake of a speedy meeting, but it's by no means easy, but that's the general idea.
Okay, that makes sense to me. What were you talking about then, Lucas, when you were talking about meta tag earlier and something about, yeah.
It's more around, I feel, the UI and migrate Drupal UI and the table that we present of you need to enable these modules. We're going to have to figure out a new solution for that, I think.
Okay.
That was my initial reaction.
Okay.
Because we have a pretty sophisticated system that if you've got a Drupal 7 site that has address module installed, and you move, or address field, I guess, in Drupal 7, address field, and you move to Drupal 9, we'll suggest you should upgrade, you should install on your Drupal 9 site the address module. And we do that by virtue of the existence, the enablement of these modules. I use address as an example because that's what came to mind first, but it's probably better with something like comment module or forum module or taxonomy module. Things like that are going to be what it would show up as. And if we move the things out of those modules, then does it get harder?
I mean, it's going to need a system to manage that, but only for the finite number of core modules. We don't have to change anything about the discovery of contrib. We just have to write something that goes through the core list and somehow identifies what it needs to do. We actually have part of that already with the manifest. that will help. So that was what Vicky was looking into, how we can use those to, because we can scan those manifests per module. But anyway, that's an issue that needs to be solved. And it needs to be solved regardless of, I mean, if migrate Drupal stuff is going to end up in contrib, you know, you were talking earlier about deprecating it and just putting it straight in contrib. I mean, it still would need to be solved. It would just need to be solved then, and we can't start solving it now if we wait.
Sure.
Like right now, we could start
I-
looking at that and
I
trying to
feel like
figure it
you're
out.
winning me over, Michael, although it might not seem like it. You're totally winning me over to your
Oh.
argument here.
I'm just, we've had this conversation a few times in these. I'm not sure if you were at all of them, but
No, yeah.
I mean, we went through all the same stuff already the same way.
Sorry, yeah, I
Um,
took up 50 of your valuable minutes.
No, it's valid to have again, because we haven't gotten that far in it. If there's other options, we should figure them out. I still think that, you know, that issue came along, the field plugin issue came along as far as it did, and you know, I think we could get it to the point where we could just RTBC it and then have the conversation that we need with the maintainers and show them an example, because that was the thing, is like we weren't sure we could easily explain everything that we wanted to do, and like we needed to start with an example to start that conversation. But I think we need to have that conversation, and I think the time is now. So, or you know, or this, you know, this year anyway, in the next couple of months. So whatever we need to do to prepare for that conversation, and decide where and how we want to have it, is something I think we should do.
So potentially going straight to a conversation with maintainer people versus, or in addition to, more of an open forum kind of a situation? Is that kind of?
Well, I think we start the conversation with Alex Pott and Gabor and see what they suggest. And yeah, if
Is it a
product maintainers feel like it needs a conversation, then we'll have one. And or if they say that in our meeting with Dries, we've already decided that this, and we just haven't told you yet, well then, you know, there you go. So I mean,
I get rubbed wrong by being volunteered to maintain something for another 8 years or something, because it's not going to die. That's
well, I mean, you know,
probably part
again,
of
there's the
why
you can have the attitude, you know, because we're developers, that the attitude is, why are you not on the new thing? Why are you still using IE6? Why are you still using IE9? Why are you still using IE7? Why are you still using Drupal 7? We're not going to make it easy for you. But then there's the business case that, you know, Drupal 9 adoption is not what anybody wanted it to be, and Drupal 7 adoption is still higher than Drupal 8 and 9 adoption combined. And if we don't get those people from Drupal 7 onto Drupal 8, then, you know, as a platform, Drupal could die. And so,
however, I feel like that argument rings more hollow every year. It's the same argument that was used around, well, that's why we have to support PHP 4.9 still or something. Like at some point, you got to upgrade to PHP 7.2 and then 3 and that 4. And now what we're seeing is already at this point, there over 50% of all Drupal 10 sites, which there's not a lot, but still it's telling. All 50% of all Drupal 10 sites are already on PHP 8.2. So that as people sort of get used to upgrading, that becomes easier. It's that initial, we got to upgrade, that is going to be hard. And I don't know that we're going to get all of those small Drupal 7 sites to ever upgrade. I just don't think it's going to happen. So to say, well, we've got an install base that's never needs to be able to have an upgrade path. Well, even if you said it's going to cost you only like $19.99 not even installments, just 1999. But you're going to have to still upgrade to PHP 8.2 and get a newer version of MySQL. They're going to throw up their arms and say, yeah, what I've got works fine. Because it's just not worth it to them, even if you make it so simple. And we know it's not that simple. Because of the nature of the client and the site, they don't care to upgrade. And then you have the other folks that are trying to, eke another 3 years out of their overly complex system. I say that in derision only, and no, it's not really a derision at all. It makes perfect business sense. And then you just need to give them a line in the sand, say at this point, you're no longer going to have support. Okay, we'll budget now to finally bite the bullet. And those guys are going to eke you out until 1 year after end of life.
We have 4 minutes left in the hour. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the weekly meetings, which have been very poorly attended lately. There are some meetings where I'm mostly talking to myself. And should we just sort of be patient and see whether interest comes back? Should we drop to bi-weekly?
I would guess we'd get more interest if we did it monthly, like first something of the month.
Yeah, and we can always revisit it when there is a Drupal 7 announcement and maybe the activity picks back up. But also it might not. I appreciate the question.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of work that should be done in the migrate module, but we've all been so busy that, none of us are, even half time developing on core at the moment. So there's just not a lot of activity to talk about each week. I wish there was. I wish I had more time to do it. I wish I had more time to devote to migrate stuff.
I assume you're busy maintaining Drupal 7 modules.
That was a joke,
No,
right?
I'm busy migrating sites from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9 and 10, actually.
Lucky.
I am very busy. It's actually about all I do anymore. They just jump me from project to project that needs migration help, and I just do the migration part, and then I move on to the next one. But anyway, yeah, I'm fine with going back to bi-weekly. The question is, do we keep the 9 o'clock meeting or the morning meeting or the afternoon meeting?
Or do we continue to
Oh,
alternate?
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, realistically we should. Mostly joking. And that we go every other week. You just have to run them all. Yeah, I'm fine with every other week. Let's have next week's in chat and talk about it more then. The week after next is mid camp, and that's going to be a late meeting, and I'm going to be there. So actually, you probably are too, Benji?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah. So maybe we have it next week in Slack and skip the following week because it's going to be mid camp, and maybe that starts a trend.
Yeah, let's plan on that.
Okay.
In the unlikely event that someone shows up next week and complains, we'll reconsider. But then we won't have this problem.
I appreciate the question. Thanks for bringing it up.
You're welcome.
For the record, I always attend, but do not comment if there is not much to say. So, but I appreciate the meetings.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to say for that. There are a lot of people that do read them, but not participate. But if nobody participates, if it's just me and Benji, or even, worse, there've been meetings where it's only been one of us running it and no one showed up, then there's nothing to talk about or read anyway. So, it doesn't. If there was a lot going on and there were at least a few people talking, I'd certainly say it's worth having the information out there for people to read later. But there's just not enough conversation for that to even have value, so.
Okay, we've got a plan there. And it is the end of the hour. I need to get some supper.
Well, thank you for organizing.
Thank you. It's always great to hear each other's voices, even if we don't see each other.
Bye.
Bye.
Well,
Bye-bye.
Thank you.